Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the government's attempts this week to persuade people that returning to school full-time next month in England without any of the sensible safeguards in place is perfectly safe. However, one particular claim made by the Education Secretary Gavin Williamson has not been standing up to scrutiny all that well as the week has worn on. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, to begin with, actually I'm going to look at Boris Johnson's little escapade this week. So, there are concerns that despite the attempts to fully open schools and colleges in England in a few weeks' time, some students may stay away or be kept away by concerned parents over a fear of COVID spreading potential. And obviously, if the fear is not unfounded, and it is not, for reasons I'll go over in a moment, then it would be a worry, because imagine you are a household where you have someone who is highly vulnerable to COVID. You really want to go and send your teenage kid to school where they're going to be mixing very freely with people with a decent likelihood of bringing that infection back. It's a very, very tough call for an awful lot of households. And the thing is, if you consider that, you know, in shops, people, anyone over the age of 11, barring a few small number of exemptions, which some people are playing on, you have to wear face masks. At least as a customer, you have to wear face masks. In pubs, restaurants and even offices, people are at least supposed to maintain a reasonable level of distancing. The 1 metre plus, as Boris Johnson characterises it. So everywhere, the advice, at least, sometimes the actual rules, but at least the advice is to distance where you can and also to wear face masks as well where it is feasible. Everywhere, apart from schools, because there will be no distancing requirements at all. None of this 1 metre plus stuff, none at all, because it isn't possible without expanded accommodation. Teachers have been asking for like Nightingale-style schools to be set up like they did with the hospitals, but that was just a publicity stunt. But we could actually use the space if you can find space available so that we can teach in larger spaces. It would at least mitigate it, even if not every class can be found in much larger space. But no such luck. No, none of that. Students won't even be required to wear face masks in school or college. So everyone will be jammed in. There won't be any wearing of masks. Now, what you always get, and I've talked about this before, you know, can sort of say this as a teacher of some experience. You do get people jammed in, even if there wasn't a deadly pandemic going on. And you notice that round about October, November, people start to get ill because they've brought all these germs from all these different parts of the region together. And they've started to mingle and coalesce into like things that make you ill. So you start to get, you know, the old freshers flu, October, November, things like that. So we know how easy it is in a school and college environment for germs to spread quite quickly and quite easily. And so the government are not imposing any measures at all in these establishments in order to control the spread of the virus. So Johnson knew he had to do something. Boris Johnson went, look, you know, people are not really happy that it's very safe. We're not able to allay those fears by saying we're going to have these procedures in place, because we're not going to have those in place. You know, because we're trying to say that although you need to distance and you should wear face masks in various other settings, apparently it's fine in schools. So what did Boris Johnson do to pull off this minor miracle of persuading people that schools are somehow a completely different kettle of fish? Well, he visited a school. He was photographed in a classroom of a primary school with his arms spread wide, showing just how much room there was. There's bags of room in here. Only there were a couple of flaws to the plan. I'm sure you can see them straight away. So the first one was that it's in the middle of the school holidays. There's no pupils there. It's empty, deserted. You're not exactly convincing people that it will be safe when they all return by standing in an empty classroom, save for the photographer, in the middle of summer. And the other one was, well, look at the photograph. He stood in an aisle, so he stood as far away from pupils as he can get while still being in that class, with his arms spread out. Now, those arms spread fully across 3 seats. Now, were that class in session, he'd be demonstrating very close proximity, literal touching distance, to between 9 and 10 kids when you consider the two-dimensional view. So I'm not sure that that particular publicity stunt really did the trick. In fact, I think it was roundly ridiculed. Not to worry, because Education Secretary Gavin Williamson to the rescue. About time he did something, teachers like myself may be wondering, because he's done bog all during the crisis so far. Now, he claimed that he'd seen a report that proved that the spread of infections in schools was very low. Now, his exact words were even further than that. His exact words were, the report makes it clear that there is little evidence that the virus is transmitted at school. So actually what he's trying to say is, actually COVID doesn't transmit in schools at all. That's why we don't need any measures there. Now, this is interesting, I thought, as both a teacher and a scientist, because every country that closed schools and then reopened them found a directly related increase in infection rates, which could be traced back to those schools and colleges. And some of those countries actually made efforts when it came to, say, distancing. Sometimes they even made people wear face masks, at least indoors. And it sounded like, to me, another case of just as in March, our ministers telling us that their scientific advice was in direct contradiction to the scientific consensus in the rest of the world. Oh, the rest of the world's got it wrong. Has it? Has it really? Can we see your research? Can we see the papers you're basing your advice on? No, it's secret. And we had the same thing. So Gavin Williamson makes this claim. Oh, can we see this report then? Oh, no, it hasn't been published yet. I see, because here's the thing. A scientific report is not like a political report. So it may be understood a political report will be read by ministers before it's published because they have to give it approval anyway. It's a political report. You can change certain things that it's going to say and things like that. Or you can try and lean on the authors of the report to go, can you just change that wording there? No. Scientific reports are published once they've been through the peer review process. In addition, Gavin Williamson is not a scientist, so he's not involved in that peer review process. So as someone who has a rudimentary idea about how the publication of scientific papers work, I'm going to suggest that either he's not talking about a scientific paper at all, but a political paper, albeit one that may have been written by public health experts, or his claim isn't really holding water. And sure enough, it seems to me that it's not strictly speaking a scientific report, albeit one that has been written by public health experts. Because a couple of things. First of all, the government are now distancing themselves from this little claim. Because there are some people that have gone public who have read this report, which has not yet been published. It is being described as a work in progress, which means it hasn't even finished conclusions. But there are those in Public Health England who have read it and have gone public with what it's saying. And it doesn't claim at all that there is little evidence of COVID being spread in schools. That's not what it says. That is a little bit of a fib. Public Health England, which seems to have had a hand in this report that the Education Secretary is referring to, says that the report claims that the infection spread amongst teenagers is basically the same as in adults. Now, what it seems Gavin Williamson was pinning his feeble claim on was the much lower risk of transmission amongst small children. At which point it then sounds like the report isn't going to be contradicting similar reports, because we've seen this. We've seen for some time, in fact, scientific evidence that says that the rate of transmission amongst very young children is actually very low. It's not zero, but it is very low. So Williamson's exact quote is still wrong when applied to primary schools. Though whether it was deliberately wrong or he made a genuine mistake because when it comes to science, he's as pig ignorant as most other ministers, if not all of them at the moment, I couldn't say. What I can say is that we are not about to see a report published saying that the risk of transmission in schools, there's basically no evidence for it, or there's very little evidence that it ever happens. That's not what's coming. What it sounds to me like, from what Public Health England have been saying, is that what the report is likely to say is that there is a very low risk in very young pupils. So the major risk factors in a primary school, which is for kids up to about 11 years old, will be staff, parents and other visitors. Now, that's not to be lightly dismissed, because when you consider that very young children need much closer adult supervision. They'll have the parents take them to the school. So you've got the potential for lots of parents to be in a close space. That has to be managed, and that is not straightforward. And the procedure for managing that and making sure that staff, parents and other visitors aren't in regular close contact with each other will be time consuming, which of course means less time spent on their normal education, because it will take a certain amount of time to get them into the classroom. However, that's just for primary schools. When it comes to secondary schools and colleges, the risk, this report is saying that Gavin Williamson is trying to use to dismiss safety fears, the risk is as high as happy hour in a crowded city bar of a Saturday night, with maybe fewer fistfights. Same risk for teenagers as for adults, is saying. So 2 attempts by the government to mislead over the risk attached to the reopening of schools have fallen flat, which returns us to the advice that both independent scientists and the government's own expert advisors, whom they appointed, have emphasised. If the government wish to open schools properly, and they absolutely should, then they need to mitigate the risk by shutting down other things where the overall rate of transmission balances. So, you can imagine it like an old-fashioned pair of scales. So on the one side, you have your R value of 1. You don't want that, to go up. Albeit ours has gone above 1 again, it seems. On the other, balancing it out, you have all the things that contribute to the spread of the virus between people. Now, to keep it in balance, if you wish to add something to the pile of virus-spreading activities like reopening all schools and colleges, then you need to take something off that's worth the same to keep it balanced. The scientists advise shutting pubs down again. But whatever the answer, the government should be putting their efforts into that, thinking about that, not trying to hoodwink the population with nonsense that wouldn't fool an even moderately intelligent 10-year-old. Now, I'm not sure how much of the population are up to the standards of a moderately intelligent 10-year-old, but hopefully it's enough to be able to see through this nonsense. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I will see you later.